After the wife of Bath told us how a woman should rule her husband, the clerk decided to show us what a perfect wife looks like. Why would a powerful marquis marry a peasant girl, only to spend 12 years systematically destroying her life? He stole her children, faked their deaths, and even forged a divorce from the Pope. Was he a monster, or was he conducting the most brutal psychological experiment in history? And so the clerk began his tale. Our host looked over at the clerk from Oxford, who was riding along as silent as a stone. You know, the sort always lost in his books, thin as a rake and serious as a judge. The host chuckled and called out, "Sir Clerk, you've been as quiet as a newlywed bride sitting at the wedding table. I haven't heard a single peep out of you all day. I'll wager my hat you're chewing over some complicated philosophical riddle, but as King Solomon says, there is a time for everything." The host flashed a broad, encouraging smile. "For heaven's sake, cheer up. This is no time for studying. Tell us a merry tale. But do me a favor, don't preach to us like a friar during Lent, trying to make us weep for our sins. And keep it simple. Save your fancy, high-style vocabulary for when you're writing letters to kings. Speak plainly so the rest of us can follow along." The clerk, being a polite and thoughtful man, nodded gently. "Host," he replied in a mild voice, "I am under your command, so I will obey as far as reason allows. I will tell you a story I learned in Padua from a very worthy scholar. He is dead now, God rest his soul. His name was Francis Petrarch, a poet whose sweet words once lit up all of Italy. But as we know, death doesn't let anyone linger here forever. It took him, just as it will eventually take all of us." He adjusted his reins and continued. Now, before Petrarch wrote the body of this tale, he penned a long introduction describing the geography. He wrote of the Piedmont region, the noble country of Saluzzo, and the high, jagged hills that border Lombardy. He described Mount Viso, where the river Po springs from a tiny source and swells as it flows east toward the sun. But honestly, that is a great deal of detail to keep in your head, so let us get straight to the heart of the matter. There is, right on the western edge of Italy, down at the base of cold Mount Viso, a beautiful, fertile plain. You can see ancient towers and walled towns scattered across the landscape. It is a delightful place, and the country is called Saluzzo. Once upon a time, there was a marquis who was lord of that land. His name was Walter. He was the noblest man born in all of Lombardy, handsome, strong, and young. He was full of honor and courtesy, and he ruled his country well. His people, from the lowest peasant to the highest lord, both loved and feared him. However, Walter had one significant fault: he didn't think about the future at all. He lived entirely for the moment. All he wanted to do was hawk and hunt, chasing game through the forests from dawn until dusk. He let his more serious duties slide, and the worst part: he refused to marry. He wouldn't even entertain the thought of a wife. This began to worry his people deeply, so one day a delegation of his subjects gathered together and approached him. The wisest man among them, a fellow with a gray beard and a steady voice, spoke up. "Noble Marquis," he said, "we love you, but there is one thing that would make our happiness complete. We need you to marry. Bow your neck under the blissful yoke of sovereignty. Think about it, Lord, time flies, it waits for no man. You are young and green now, but age creeps in like a stone, and death threatens everyone." The old man pressed on, "So please let us choose a wife for you. We will find someone from the noblest family in the land, a woman worthy of your hand. Just release us from this creeping fear that your line will end, and a stranger will inherit your heritage. Please marry soon." Walter looked at their anxious faces and felt a stir of pity. "My dear people," he said with a sigh, "you are asking me to do something I never intended. I love my freedom, and marriage is often a trap that binds a man tight. But I see your true intent is born of loyalty, so I will agree to marry as soon as possible." He raised a hand to silence their cheers. "But there is one condition. You offered to choose my wife for me. I release you from that task. I will choose my own wife, and I charge you on your lives that whoever I choose, no matter how poor or low-born she is, you must honor her as if she were the daughter of an emperor. You must never grumble or complain about my choice." The people were so relieved that he had simply agreed to the wedding that they swore to abide by anything he said. They asked him to set a date for the nuptials so they would know he was serious. He named a day, the people knelt down, thanked him profusely, and went home to prepare. Walter immediately started the arrangements for the feast. He ordered jewels, gold brooches, and fancy clothes to be made. But strangely, nobody knew who the bride was going to be. Now, not far from the palace, down a muddy track, there was a small village. It was a poor place where the people made their living scraping a harvest from the land. Among these poor folk lived a man named Janicola. He was considered the poorest of them all. But as they say, God often sends his grace to a little ox's stall. Janicola had a daughter named Griselda. Griselda was young, but she possessed a virtue and maturity far beyond her years. She didn't know the meaning of luxury or idle pleasure. She drank cold water more often than wine. She worked hard to please virtue, not for comfort. She took care of her old father with great reverence, spinning wool in the field while watching her few sheep. When she came home in the evening, she would gather herbs and cabbages, boil them for a simple dinner, and sleep on a hard bed. Walter had seen her often while he was out hunting. He didn't look at her with the lust of a young man, but with serious, calculating admiration. He saw her goodness and her quiet strength. He decided that if he ever had to marry, he would marry her. The wedding day finally arrived. The palace was decorated with banners and filled with the smell of roasting meats. The guests were gathered in their finery, but still there was no bride. People started whispering behind their hands, "Is he tricking us? Will he not wed after all?" But Walter had secretly commanded a wedding dress and rings to be made. As the morning sun climbed high, Walter and his rich retinue, all in velvet and silk, rode out of the palace gates. They headed straight for the poor village. Griselda, completely innocent of all this, was just coming back from the well with a heavy pot of water on her shoulder. She wanted to finish her chores quickly so she could stand in her doorway with the other peasants and watch the new marchioness arrive. Just as she reached her door, Walter called her name. She froze, set down her water pot in the ox stall, and fell to her knees, waiting for his command. Walter spoke seriously, his voice echoing in the quiet yard. "Where is your father, Griselda?" "He is inside, lord," she said humbly. She went in and fetched him. Walter took the trembling old man by the hand and led him aside. "Janicola, I love you as a faithful subject, and I want to take your daughter as my wife. But I need to ask her something in your presence." He turned to Griselda, who was pale with confusion. "I want to marry you, but I must ask you this. Are you ready to submit to my will with a good heart? Can I do whatever I want, whether it makes you laugh or causes you pain, and you will never complain? Will you never say no when I say yes? Swear this and I will marry you." Griselda was trembling with fear, but she answered clearly, "Lord, I am not worthy of this honor, but if it is your will, I will never disobey you in thought or deed, even if I have to die." "That is enough," Walter said. He led her outside to the gathered crowd and presented her. "This is my wife," he announced. "Honor her and love her." Then, so she wouldn't bring any of her old poverty into the palace, his highborn ladies surrounded her. They weren't exactly happy about handling her old, rough clothes, but they stripped off her rags right there in the yard. They dressed her in the beautiful gown Walter had brought, combed her tangled hair, and placed a crown on her head. She looked so beautiful and regal that the people from her own village hardly recognized her. Walter married her then and there, lifted her onto a snow-white horse, and led her to the palace. The feast lasted until the sun went down. And believe it or not, Griselda took to her new life perfectly. You would never guess she had been born in a hut. She looked as though she had been raised in an imperial court. She had so much grace and eloquence that everyone loved her. She could settle disputes among the nobles with wise, gentle words. People came from all over the region just to look at her. Not long after, Griselda gave birth to a daughter. Although they would have preferred a boy, Walter and everyone else were happy to see that she could bear children. But then, while the baby was still nursing, a strange and dark desire caught hold of Walter. He wanted to test his wife. He wanted to see if she was still as steadfast as she had promised to be. It was a needless, cruel test, if you ask me. He already knew she was good, but once he had the idea, he wouldn't let it go. He came to her room at night with a stern, grim face. "Griselda," he said, "you haven't forgotten your poor origins, have you? My nobles are unhappy. They hate being subjects to someone of your low blood, especially now that a child is born. I have to do something about the baby. It is not what I want, but I must satisfy my people. Show me the patience you swore on our wedding day." Griselda didn't change her expression at all. She looked at him with clear eyes. "Lord," she said, "my child and I are yours. Do with your own property as you please. Nothing you do can displease me. I gave you my heart and my will when I gave you my body." Walter was pleased with her answer, though he pretended to be grim. He left the room. A little later, he sent a rough, scary-looking sergeant to her. The sergeant stalked into the room, looking like a man ready to commit a crime. "Madam," he rumbled, "I must obey my lord. I am commanded to take this child." He grabbed the baby roughly and acted as if he was going to kill it right there. Griselda sat as still as a lamb. She let him take the child. She only asked meekly if she could kiss her baby one last time. She took the child in her lap, blessed it, and lulled it softly. "Farewell, my child," she whispered. "I give your soul to God, for tonight you will die for my sake." She gave the baby back to the sergeant and said, "Go and do my lord's will. But please, unless my lord forbade it, bury her little body so the wild beasts and birds don't tear it apart." The sergeant took the baby back to Walter and told him everything. Walter felt a twinge of pity, but he stuck to his plan. He told the sergeant to wrap the baby softly and take it secretly to his sister, the Countess of Panico, in Bologna. She was to raise the child perfectly, without telling anyone whose it was. 4 years passed. Griselda was as cheerful and obedient as ever. Then she had a baby boy, the heir everyone wanted. When the boy was 2 years old, Walter decided to test her again. "Wife," he said one evening, "my people are murmuring. They say when I die, the blood of Janicola will rule them. It is breaking my heart. I have to deal with the boy just like I did his sister." "Be patient," Griselda replied calmly. "I have said it and I will say it again. I want nothing but what you want. If my children die, so be it. I have had no part in them but pain. You are my lord. Do your pleasure." Walter was amazed. He cast his eyes down, wondering at her patience. He sent the same ugly sergeant to take the boy. The sergeant seized the child. Griselda kissed her son, blessed him, and asked only that his tender limbs be saved from the birds and beasts. The sergeant took the boy to Bologna to be raised with his sister. Walter watched her closely for years, looking for any sign of resentment, a frown, a sharp word. He found none. As she got older, she only seemed more true to him. But outside the palace walls, the rumors about Walter were getting bad. People whispered that he was a cruel murderer who had killed his children because he was ashamed of his wife's poverty. They began to hate him. Walter didn't care. He wanted to test Griselda one last, terrible time. When their daughter was 12 years old, Walter sent a messenger to Rome. He forged a papal bull, a document from the Pope himself, giving him permission to divorce Griselda and marry a new wife, just to soothe the anger of his people. He announced this publicly. Poor Griselda heard the news. She was heartbroken, but she prepared herself to endure this too. Walter sent a secret letter to Bologna, asking his sister to bring the children home. He asked her to bring them in an open, royal procession, but not to tell anyone who they were. She was to say the young girl was Walter's new bride. The day came. Walter stood before his people in the great hall and spoke boisterously to Griselda. "Griselda," he said, "I liked your loyalty, but my people force me to take a new wife. The Pope has agreed. My new wife is on her way. You must leave. Take the dowry you brought me and go back to your father's house." Griselda answered patiently, though her voice trembled. "My lord, I always knew I was not worthy of you. I thank God for the time you kept me in honor. I will gladly go back to my father and live as a widow. But you mentioned my dowry. I remember well what I brought. It was my wretched clothes and my nakedness. God, you were so kind on our wedding day. But love grows old. She took a breath and continued, I will return your jewels and your rings. But I cannot return the clothes I wore when I came, for they are gone. I came to you naked, and I must leave naked. But surely you wouldn't want the womb that bore your children to be seen by the people. Please, in exchange for my maidenhead, let me take just a simple smock to cover myself. The smock on your back, Walter said, choking up a little, you may keep. Griselda stripped off her royal velvet robes until she stood only in her undergarment. Barefoot and bareheaded, she walked out of the palace and back down the road to her father's house. The people followed her, weeping at the injustice. She didn't shed a tear. Her father, Janicola, came out to meet her. He had always suspected this would happen. He knew royal whims change like the wind. He tried to cover her with her old, rough coat, but it didn't fit anymore. She lived with him for a while, never showing any sign that she had once been a queen. Then the Earl arrived from Bologna with the 2 children. The girl was dazzlingly beautiful in her wedding jewels. Walter sent a message to Griselda, the new Marchioness is coming. I want the palace to look perfect, you know how I like things. Come and organize the preparations. Griselda went to the palace immediately. She wore her rough peasant clothes. She started sweeping, setting tables, and making beds, working like a maid in the house she once ruled. When the guests arrived, they saw the new bride and her brother. They whispered among themselves, Walter is smart. This new wife is younger and fairer than Griselda. Griselda stood in the hall, greeting guests cheerfully, not ashamed of her rags. Finally, Walter called her over. Griselda, he asked playfully, how do you like my new wife? Right well, my lord, she said, looking at the girl kindly. I have never seen a fairer maiden. I hope you will be happy. But one thing I beg of you, do not prick this tender maiden with the same tormenting you used on the other one. She has been raised in luxury. She could not endure adversity the way a poor creature could. Walter couldn't take it anymore. He saw her patience, her complete lack of malice. He broke down. This is enough, Griselda mine, he cried. I have tested your faith more than any man has ever tested a woman. I know your steadfastness. He took her in his arms and kissed her. She stood there in a daze, like someone waking from a deep sleep. Griselda, he said, holding her tight, by God, you are my wife. I have no other. This girl you see here, she is your daughter. And this boy is your son. I kept them safe in Bologna. I didn't kill them. I did this only to test you. When she heard this, Griselda fainted for pure joy. When she woke up, she grabbed her children, hugging them and weeping tears all over them. Oh, thank you, Lord. I don't care if I die right now that I have your love and my children back. The ladies rushed her to a room, stripped off her rude clothes and dressed her in a cloth of gold and a crown. They brought her back to the hall, and everyone honored her. The feast that day was even better than their wedding. They lived happily for many years. Their daughter married a great lord, and their son eventually succeeded Walter and was a fortunate ruler, though I should add, he didn't test his wife nearly so harshly. Now listen closely. Petrarch didn't write this story so that wives would imitate Griselda's extreme humility. That would be unbearable and frankly impossible. He wrote it so that everyone, men and women, should be constant in adversity, just as Griselda was. God tests us sometimes not to know our will. He already knows everything, but to exercise us and make us stronger. But before I go, let me say one thing. It would be hard to find 2 or 3 Griseldas in a whole town nowadays. If you put modern gold coins to a test like that, they'd snap rather than bend. So for the love of the wife of Bath, and may God give her and her kind plenty of power, I'll sing you a little song. Griselda is dead, and her patience is buried with her. So I cry out to everyone, no husband should be foolish enough to test his wife's patience expecting to find a Griselda. He will fail. And you noble wives, don't let humility nail your tongue down. Don't let any scholar write a story about your patience. Stand up for yourselves. Be like Echo, always have the last word. Don't be fooled by innocence, take control. If you're strong, stand your ground like a camel. If you are weak, be fierce like a tiger, chatter like a mill. Don't fear your husband, even if he's armed in mail, your sharp tongue can pierce his armor. Make him jealous, make him cringe like a quail. If you're beautiful, show off your face and your clothes. If you are ugly, spend his money freely and make lots of friends. Be as light as a leaf on a linden tree, and let him do the weeping and the ringing and the wailing. And so the quiet clerk proves he has quite the sharp tongue after all, ending a tale of silence with a song of defiance. He managed to satisfy the host's demand for a merry tale while winking at the wife of Bath. Masterful. If you enjoyed that twist ending as much as I did, leave a like to pay your respects to the storyteller. We have many more pilgrims to hear from and many more miles to go, so subscribe now and join our caravan. Until the next tale, keep your patience, but keep your wits sharper.